Hi guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today's video is very exciting because I'm going to be chatting about my April TBR. Now for the month of April, I'm pretty pumped for this month for a variety of reasons. One, we have some exciting new releases coming out. Two, I feel like I finally have shed my reading slump. I've been reading, enough recently, but my pace with reading has definitely been diminished. But the past couple of weeks, I feel revived. I have read so much and I want to carry that energy going into the month of April. And then lastly, at the very end of this month, I'm leaving for a very exciting big trip. Clay and I are traveling to Japan, so I feel even more motivated to read. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and chat about the books I hope to read this month. Starting off my April TBR, I'm just going to shout a new release that's coming out that I feel like quite a few of us will be picking up, and that is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. Leigh Bardugo is coming out with a dark historical fantasy story, and I truly could not be more excited. This is set during the Spanish Golden Age, and we're introduced to our main character Luisa, who spends her day trying to not get the ire of her mistress and also uses scraps of magic to make her life a little bit easier. One day her mistress notices like a new servant within their household who's secretly hiding like very powerful magic, allows them to have little miracles occur, and Luisa is then basically forced to try to use this magic to their best interest in the household, which quickly gains the attention of the King of Spain, and Luisa and this family are like thrown headfirst into a very dangerous world of politics and alchemists and other types of dark magic. I love Leigh Bardugo's writing quite a bit. I've enjoyed her books now for many, many years, but I will say out of all of her books, this release in particular feels very catered to me. So I'm so pumped to read this. I don't care how long it is. I don't care how slow burn it is. I feel like I'm just going to eat the whole thing up. And I love the cover. Aesthetic goals, to be honest. The next book on my TBR is Child of Prophecy by Juliette Marillier. I've fallen down a bit of a romantasy rabbit hole recently, some really fantastic romantasy in particular, which I will be featuring in an upcoming video. But in reading this, it's made me really want to go back and continue to read the series by Juliette Marillier. This is not romantasy. It's very much cottagecore. It has beautiful lyrical writing, and it centers female main characters kind of going on a journey of self-discovery, but they often do have a romantic aspect of it, and I just love Juliette Marillier so much, and I need to finish the series. It's also spring, which feels like the perfect time to read her novels. But if you're not familiar with the Seven Waters series, in the first one we're introduced to our main character, who is the only daughter to a large family, and at the beginning of the book her father actually remarries, and her stepmother actually curses everyone in her family. Everyone is transformed into swans aside from her, and it's up to her to save them. Outside of this being a very perilous and dangerous quest, our main character's life is made even more difficult because she's also lost her voice, and if she utters a word, she dooms her family. There we follow our main character as she ventures out into the wide world and has to rely on her enemies to help her. It's so beautifully done, and each book within the series is still connected to the same family. It centers, again, female main characters, magic and prophecy and fate, and I'm really looking forward to finally picking up book 3 because I love books 1 and 2 so much. Another fantasy series I'm looking forward to finally starting is the Lycanus trilogy by James Islington. This I've heard fantastic things about. So many people have said that they also loved this after reading The Will of the Many, so I'm really looking forward to picking up something fast-paced and just very, very entertaining. This is another Roman-inspired fantasy story by this author, following our main character, set in a world where basically these once very powerful entities ruled, but before the start of this novel, they were overthrown, and any human connected to them and their power also had to have their powers limited and agree to the rebellion's like 4 major tenets. Our main character finds out at the beginning of this book that he has some type of like hidden magical ability, and he's not quite sure what to do with it. I also believe this has a bit of a school setting. I'm sure it will have lots of intrigue and combat. I've heard such good things about this, so I'm looking forward to finally starting it and being able to chat with you guys about it, finally. So here we are. I also hope to get to A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber. This is the third and final book to the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, a YA fantasy series that has truly delighted me in every form and fashion. It's so cute. I also love how true it is to the fairy tale style it's written in. I love the main character. I love the concept. It's just so fun. It sweeps me away, puts a smile on my face. But this series follows our main character Evangeline, and at the beginning of book 1, she has had her heart broken. So she decides to turn to the Fate of Broken Hearts named Jax to basically help heal her, if you will. They're basically like gods for like specific concepts within this world. Jax agrees to help her. She gives him 3 kisses of his choosing. Things get very complicated from there. We see her as she participates in a competition to become the queen of a new kingdom, gets wrapped up in vampire politics. Like, I'm saying, so many different magical things come out of the woodwork in this series, and I loved it immensely. I really enjoyed books 1 and 2. I love the dynamic between our two main characters. It's cute and fun and cheery, and I truly feel like it has a really good sense of like what it's trying to achieve, and because of that I've just been like delighted by this. I was so surprised with how much I liked it, and now I can't wait to finish it. Next up, I have a few sci-fi books on my TBR. I have been really into sci-fi lately. I feel like I've always been into sci-fi, but I'm trying to stay consistent with it. The first one is Babylon's Ashes by James S.A. Corey. This is the 6th book to the Expanse series. I flew through the first 5 books of this series for the most part, and then took a year-long break between books 5 and 6, but this is the month I hopefully will restart this because I honestly love book 5 and I don't want to forget stuff, which is truly something I'm very prone to do. But this is a space opera story following the politics of a near future world where Earth, the Moon, Mars, and a series of space stations called the Belt all have their own governments, and they're all very much at odds with each other. We follow a lot of characters throughout this series, but I would say our consistent primary set of characters is James and his crew, and he is a ship captain who at the beginning of book 1 stumbles upon a piece of alien technology, and things get wild quickly. What I like about this series so much is that while it's long and there's lots of different stuff happening, it's constantly keeping itself fresh. Nothing feels repetitive. Like, there's a larger story at play that's grown with each book, but every like individual storyline for each book that's solved and focused on is also very, very entertaining, which I feel like is a hard balance to have. So I need to get back to this, because it's been too long, and I also feel like this will be like such a good plain read, something to really capture my attention. Next up, I also have Severance by Ling Ma. This book has been like looking at me from my bookshelf ever since I picked it up. This is a strange sci-fi pandemic story, like near future, like very strange and weird. And I believe the central storyline is about an office space and like the work environment, and it's supposed to be like a satire, very, very critical. What's super odd is that this is not the inspo for the show Severance, but they do feel like, at least at a high level, they have some similarities. I love the show Severance, and I'm really curious to read this because I've heard fantastic things about this, and I really like this author's short stories, but I'm also interested to compare and contrast the two pieces of work, if you will. So yeah, I feel like this will be a very quick read, and I'm looking forward to it. Next up is, I believe, kind of a more underrated sci-fi story, but one of my favorite fantasy sci-fi reviewers said it's one of their favorite books, so I added it to my TBR a while ago, and I'm finally getting to it, and that is Retribution Falls by Chris Wooding. This is a motley crew of unlikely people, all down on their luck setup, taking on an easy, or what appears to be an easy heist, but everything goes wrong, and they find themselves in the midst of lots of complicated political happenings. Basically a setup for success, if you ask me. I love this dynamic because I feel like it's a perfect balance of great characters to fall in love with, interesting character growth and character dynamics to appreciate and read from, and then obviously an action-packed plot that also has kind of an outsider perspective, which I also feel like adds a lot of drama. But this follows our main character, Darian, and his crew is all down on their luck for different reasons. Drake is a demonist in hiding, traveling with an armored golem burdened by guilt. Jez is a new navigator, desperate to keep her secret from the rest of the crew. And Malvery is a disgraced doctor drinking himself to death. I mean, what an interesting setup, if you ask me. I just feel like the dynamics of this plot just really seems like something I would enjoy, and I'm hoping to love it. And then lastly, for sci-fi, I have Ancillary Mercy by Anne Leckie. Look at me looking to wrap up a series so quickly. This is the 3rd and final book to the Imperial Radich series, though I do know there are additional books within this world, but I think they're more like extensions to the plot, not like a direct continuation, but correct me if I'm wrong. This series has been fantastic. Again, another perfect blend of like such great characters, such an interesting plot line, great writing, super captivating. I have loved this series so much from the first 2 books I have picked up, but this series introduces us to our main character Breck, and before the start of this novel, Breck was once known as the Justice of Toron. They were basically the consciousness of an entire ship, and also existing through individuals called ancillaries, which were 20 individual bodies all through collected consciousness. However, though, at the beginning of book 1, Breck is now a singular being, and they are on a road to revenge. We don't know why, we don't know against who. The way you kind of see Breck pick up her own motley crew, learn about her past, and also take on current, present day, complicated political issues. I just love Breck so much, and I think as a character, they're just so fascinating. Also, Anne Leckie's discussion on language and gender within this is also so good. I just feel like for honestly not very long books, the author's able to pack quite a bit, and I fly through these like no other. So I also want to read this. Next up shouldn't be too much of a surprise, and I'm happy to report I have restarted my efforts with reading this, and that is The Assassin's Fate by Robin Hobb. It's happening. I'm doing it. I'm sorry, I keep showing off this book in TBRs. It's getting embarrassing at this point, but I'm happy to say I have read some of this again. I've picked it back up. My friend Elias, who was so much further behind than me, is somehow ahead of me, about to finish this entire Robin Hobb universe, and it's so embarrassing. So we've been chatting about it. Well, we were chatting about the first 2 books in the series, and he read them so fast, and he's already on book 3, and I simply can't let him finish before me. That is just, I draw the line there, you know what I mean? So I've picked this book back up. I have read about 100 pages last month. I'm gonna continue my slow, methodical reading of this until probably I'm not able to put it down, and then I read the whole thing in a span of like 2 days. It's complicated, but this is the 3rd and final book to the last Fitz and the Fool series, the last series within the Robin Hobb universe. I've been unwell throughout this entire series. The first 2 books were excellent. I love these characters so much, it hurts my insides. The next book that's on my TBR is Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. This just seems like a really interesting mix of like literary fiction and thriller. I also feel like it could be a good book to bring with me while I'm traveling, just because it feels like it would read super quickly. But this book is set up with the concept of there is this submarine project that offers anyone who enters the submarine like healing abilities. So a bunch of people sign up and participate in this study for their own reasons, but then something goes wrong where it explodes, resulting in the death of some people within the submarine itself. And from there, we're reading from and following a variety of people both inside the submarine and also kind of involved with the study in a tertiary way, maybe as a family member or a researcher. It sounds really intriguing. I've heard such good things about Angie Kim's writing, and I now own 2 of her books, so I want to get to them. So I have this on my TBR. And the next book on my TBR is The Pachinko Parlor by Elise Shua Dusupin. Pachinko Parlor is said to be an astounding work of fiction, also said to be a beguiling and nuanced exploration of identity and otherness. In this story, we're introduced to our main character, Claire, who kind of splits her time between tutoring a 10-year-old girl in an abandoned hotel and also spending her time daydreaming on the floor of her grandparents' apartment. Her grandparents immigrated to Japan from Korea during the Civil War and opened up a pachinko parlor, which is still open to this day. I think this is a really like introspective story, particularly just following our main character Claire as she lives and moves throughout her life. I've heard amazing things about this book. It's also not too long, so I feel like it could be a great one to read in one sitting, but I'm excited about this. It also won the National Book Award, which is very cool. And then the last book on my TBR is The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro. Will I finally read this book this month? Now that is the question of the century, isn't it? I have had this book and have wanted to read this book for so long. It also really feels like a book I would love. It's this author's interpretation of like a classic Arthurian legend, and it's a quest story written in a very like beautiful, fantastical way, again sort of capturing that feeling of a fable and a tale. In this book, we're following parents who are basically setting out on a journey to try to find their lost child. Along the way, they encounter a variety of obstacles and issues that they have to overcome, and I also believe that their party grows too. Again, I love traditional fantasy. I love very like nature forward fantasy stories, very lyrical and stunning stories. And I feel like this is going to be a book that I will really enjoy. And I hope I actually read it this month. So I guess we'll just see. Alright guys, that is my April TBR. Please let me know down below some books you hope to get to this month, as I would love to know. And I will see you soon with another video soon. Goodbye.